Hello and welcome to Let the Healing Begin. I am your host, Patricia Bunton, here today with my co-host, Donna Bunton, and a very special guest, a gentleman that I have the pleasure as well as the privilege of calling son and pastor, Pastor Lamont Pierce.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Lamont is actually the pastor of New Life Christian Outreach right here in Dover, Delaware. And he's our guest today because there's a special subject that's near and dear to his heart that we wanted to give him the opportunity to be able to share with our listening audience and our watching audience, actually. And I'll be able to minister just some healing because that's the focus of our show, Let the Healing Begin. And we're excited about having him today to be able to do that. Our topic for today is actually, we're dealing with healing and growing from growing up in a home without a father, a fatherless home, and that has been Pastor Pierce's experience. He is an amazing individual today, a man in spite of. So we're excited about having him on the show today just to share with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Pastor Pierce, we're excited about it because there are so many young men, young boys, and young men who have experienced the exact same thing in their lives growing up. You know, they grew up in homes where their fathers were not present. Some of them went on to do well, others not so well. And while my focus and my concern is for young boys in general, young men and young boys in general,
Right.
I'm particularly interested in the effects upon young African American boys and young men. So what have you found to be, just from your personal experience, what have you found to be some of the challenges and tools that you have been able to implement in your life to, overcome those things that you were forced to face?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really greatly appreciate it. I'm excited to be on the show, and I thank you too much for the compliment that you gave me.
Sure.
That I'm an amazing, grown into becoming an amazing man. But, the reality is that I didn't have a father that lived in the house with me. While my father was present in my life in another town, we didn't actually live in the same household. And I think you asked the question, and I hope that I target the question or answer the question correctly, and that is that you asked how did it affect my life, and I think that it affected me drastically in a lot of different ways. One way is that people look, young men, whether it be African American or not, we look for role models.
Absolutely.
We look for men. We don't know what it's supposed to be a man.
That's right.
We don't know what it really is supposed to look like to be a man. And unfortunately, in African American communities, people begin to look to different things that are out there, whether it be gangs, whether it be pimps, or, in different areas, drug dealers and different things like that.
Yes.
And that's the role models that we sometimes see depending upon the culture that you're raised in.
Right.
And I fell victim to that. I had some brothers that were involved in some things that were not necessarily profitable in the right way. I'll say it that way. Yeah, I'll say that. But I looked to them as role models, and it impacted me. My father wasn't in the household to say to me, don't do this or don't do that. While he would say that from a distance, he wasn't in the household to implement it and hold me accountable.
Enforce it.
To enforce it, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's the key thing, that it's enforced, and that at the end of the day, accountability is important. I think one of the things that I found along the way for me personally is that if there's no one to hold you accountable to something, you'll find yourself falling victim to any and everything.
That is so true.
That's true. And that was my story, and I think it's a lot of the stories for a lot of young men that are out there as well.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this question. As a young man, girl, how old were you when your father left your home?
I never ever. My mother left my father when I was 9 months old.
Wow, are you serious?
Yeah. So actually, my mother said she was supposed to leave before I was born, but then she ended up being pregnant, and so I wasn't even 1 year old. So I never actually lived. There was a season in my life, I believe it was about 11 or 12, when my mother encouraged me. I was coming into puberty, going through puberty. My mother encouraged me to go live with my father, and that just wasn't good.
Wasn't a good idea.
No, it wasn't a good idea because I wasn't ready for the freedom and the liberty. It wasn't good in a lot of different areas. It wasn't good so far as him trying to enforce discipline on me really receiving,
not having been there before.
Yes, me receiving the discipline from him. I wasn't used to that, and it didn't even last a week.
Wow.
Seriously, it didn't even last 5 days.
Being honest.
Yeah, it didn't even last a week.
Oh my gosh! My question to you was, did you experience any resentment towards your mother in the midst of that whole process of them being separated?
I did not. No, I did not. And I don't know if I don't know why that is, but I want to believe it's because my mother had a real loving spirit, and she had the ability to love us just unconditionally.
Right.
She was I love my mother, God bless her soul, but she was a unique individual, and I never felt like, why did you leave him? Because I learned the history of what she encountered when she lived with him. My father was abusive.
Reasons.
So he was abusive physically.
Wow.
He was abusive emotionally, and he was a starch alcoholic as well, you know? And with
What a
that being,
combination.
I know, right? So with that being said, she knew that it wouldn't be healthy for the family. It wouldn't be, right. And mind you, we had 3 boys and 1 girl. So it just wasn't a healthy environment. So I actually was grateful to my mother that she didn't allow me to live in some of the things that my brothers and sisters had to live in.
Exactly.
We have ongoing debates about this where they're like, oh, you didn't have to experience. Sorry.
And you were the youngest, right?
I am the youngest. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
So no resentment towards my mother at all, so far as from that standpoint, at all. But I will say this, sometimes people might get resentment, towards their mother specifically, but you don't know what a person encounters in that time, in that season of their life.
That's true.
You don't know what might be the best thing for them to do. I say this all the time, and I don't want to get off the topic, but I say no parent, for the most part, in the moment, they try to do what they think is best in that moment.
Right.
What they know to do.
What they know to do. Now hindsight's 20/20. We may look back and say, man, I should have did this, or I should have did that. But in the moment, for the most part, you're trying to do what's best to keep your family
you're trying
safe
to survive.
and survive.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So did your brothers were older,
They
right?
were. Yep.
Did either of your brothers step into that place of being the man of the house,
That's a good
or kind of
question.
step into that father figure role for you?
So they probably would say yes. they probably would say yes, and I think that my brother is 16. My oldest brother is 16 years older than me, and
Really?
then the one below him is 14 years older. So both of them, like I said, they had their own struggles. And the reality was, when my mother, being a single parent home, when she went to work, my one brother was on the go doing his own thing, my oldest brother, and my other brother had his other struggles that. Though I looked up to him, that was probably part of my problem.
Right.
I looked up to him, but he wasn't.
He was that good example.
Yeah, at that time,
Right.
And I don't mean to say anything bad. That's just where he was at that time.
Right.
That's real.
But the blessing for me was that my sister was the one, though she had her issues as well.
Right.
My sister was the one that was like, "You're not gonna be like that. You're not gonna be like everybody else." So I was blessed in the fact that my sister really was like, was the mother underneath my mother.
Gotcha.
And and keeping me by the hand and holding me accountable. And I love the word that you used, enforced discipline on me. She really did.
That's wonderful. Now, my other question to you is, did there come a point in time? You said you actually lived with your father. Did you ever go live with your father?
I tried to live with him, and it didn't.
Or did it work out?
Yeah.
Right. For that 1 week.
Yeah, I tried. It didn't
Test
work.
trial.
Yeah, right.
Did there ever come a point in your life when you were able to actually reconcile with your father?
Ooh.
In a place of real forgiveness.
Oh yes. Thank you for bringing that about. So yeah, I did. I think that, but the Lord had to do that.
I know that's right.
The Lord had to bring that, because the reality was, as you grow up, a young man, you look back over your history of your life and you begin to say, I wish I had this, or I wish I encountered that. We all can have the story of the book of our wishes, right? So in the midst of that, when I began to do that, and I would cry out to the Lord, and I encourage people to do that, the Lord began to show me that my father did the best that he could with what he had, and what was imparted into him as well.
Right.
Mind you, my father dropped out of school when he was in high school because he had to help bring money into the household, so he had to work in the fields.
Sure.
Then it was at the time at the end of slavery, and they migrated from the south up north. So then he came up here, and the whole mindset was, a man that don't work don't eat, which is biblical, right? And then but everything that they knew was provide.
Yeah.
But the actual relationship part was lost. So he
That
would
is
provide
so
for
true.
everything we did in sports. Everything I did in sports, he was at every game. He brought me to every game. Any piece of equipment that I needed, he did all that. But the relationship part of it was
that was missing.
it was missing. But I understand.
Right.
But the Lord had to do that. The Lord had to speak to me and say,
I'm sure.
he did the best with what he was in, because his father was a sharecropper, right?
Right.
And worked the fields and picked cotton and things like that. Right. And this was just the culture of the day and age that we lived in.
Right.
Now, and it was difficult for me growing up, because here I am, though I'm a big individual. I know you can't tell that, but though I'm a big individual, my father, I'm very sensitive at heart. I'm a very compassionate being.
You
and
are.
I'm an
Definitely
emotional
are.
type person, right?
Yes.
So the slightest thing, because I'm sensitive, I would cry, and my father, you weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah, he was those tough guy
Oh
men.
yeah, he was. You didn't
Tough
cry.
dad.
You didn't cry, and what's wrong with you? You can't. But I understand the culture.
Right.
You can't cry because if you cry, you won't make it. You won't succeed.
That's true.
You have to pull up your
You'll be
bootstraps.
consumed.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So that
Yes.
was his mindset. But the Lord had to show me that. The Lord had to show me that he did the best he can with what he had, and he had some bloodline things so far as
Yeah.
alcoholism that he didn't grasp a hold of. You know what I
That's
mean?
true.
And but I did by the grace of God.
Yeah.
So
That's
so
awesome.
I had to come to a place of forgiving him and tell him, Dad, I understand. And I realized that, you did the best you can with what you
Right.
had.
Right, because he
And-
couldn't give what he didn't know
What
how
he didn't
to.
know how to give,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's one of the things that I
Exactly.
found, particularly like in our black culture. Like you said, our parents did what they could do. They did what they knew to do. They couldn't do what they didn't know to
Right,
do, and we
right.
can't expect that from them. Now we realize that as we're older.
Absolutely.
But I remember growing up, and as we got older, we began to compare notes, different friends and different other races. And there just wasn't a lot of, particularly with the males, bonding. There wasn't a lot of hugging. There wasn't a lot, like you said, it was like, you got to be hard.
Right.
And that was the concept that, was inbred into our young black men and our young black boys, who grew up to be men, rather. And so that there wasn't there. Like you said, you were a compassionate kind of person, and you are. He's a big crybaby.
Amen.
But that's a beautiful
In a
thing.
good
I
way.
love to see that in men.
Amen.
That softness, that tenderness that they can impart into their young sons and cause them to know, that it's okay to be that way. You don't have to be hard and living in a shell and not showing emotion and
Real
not
men
feeling.
cry.
Yeah, real men
cry.
do cry.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that women look for in men. We want them to be strong and we want them to be capable and able, but we also want them to be compassionate
Absolutely.
and sensitive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. So as we can see, you turned out pretty darn good.
Praise God. Thank
And
the
we
Lord.
know that was God,
Amen.
and God's well able to do that. What is it that you would share with young men today who've grown up or are growing up in a home without their fathers? I know many of them perhaps may have resentment towards their father, because one of the things you shared was really key was there was abuse in the family,
Right.
and that always affects the children in the home. There's no way to avoid it, and I know that there are probably many young men they're having to deal with growing up without a father. Then they have to deal with the fact that of what they experienced, those negative things that they experienced with their fathers.
Right.
So what is that word? What is that one thing that you would speak to them, that you would share to them, that will perhaps get them through that phase in your lives?
Wow, she said one thing. I'll try my best.
Say more. You can share more than one.
So one of the things that I think is important when you talk about young men without a father, or especially cultural wise,
Right.
I think that there was an awesome show that I seen one time. It was a documentary on YouTube or something called "The Mask We Live In."
Wow.
In this documentary, it shows the mask that it targets young men,
Right.
and predominantly young men in indigent communities as well.
Right.
It talks about the young men and how they wear a mask based upon the culture, the environment that they live in.
That is so true.
But it's true. But then the sad side of that is, unfortunately, we begin to have the mask, but then there's no place where we take the mask off and we can be ourselves.
Be yourself.
So the young man begins to hear, "Be a man. Man, don't cry. Toughen up. You got to provide for your family."
Yep.
All these different things. That's true. That's
true.
very true. But then at the same time, we don't hear it's okay to cry.
Right.
Exactly.
We don't hear
that
real-
balance. That
Right.
balance in
Right.
there.
And in this movie, in this documentary, I don't know if it's a documentary or movie, The Mask We Live In, it talks about and it shows you that a lot of times young men go to school with this mask on.
Yeah.
But behind the mask, they had them do a illustration, if you will, and behind the mask they would write on what they really go through. So behind the mask, they might be thinking about feeding my feeding my brother
That's
and sister.
powerful.
They might be thinking about, my mother's on crack.
Right.
My father's not present.
Right.
Or my father's incarcerated. Various different
Real
things.
issues.
Real
Yeah.
issues. But the thing is, when they go to school, they put on this mask because they have to be tough.
I'm okay.
I'm okay. And I think one of the key things is that it's okay to be real with where you're really at.
Yeah.
Yes.
And accept,
important.
because to our own self, we have to be real and we have to be true to where we're really at. And understand that God, if God is for us, who can be against us?
That's right.
So when I begin to think about that, and I begin to think about young men growing up, and that young men really need to be true to themselves and find someone that they esteem, that they honor,
Right.
that they value, and most important, that they can look up to. And most importantly, we have to try the Lord.
That's true.
We have to go to the Lord.
That is so
because the Lord will make us and develop us and make us into be who He wants us to be as a man,
Yeah.
as a role model in society as well.
That's
Yeah.
important.
I want to ask, did you find that having, the father absent from the home created a void in you as a young man that you found yourself filling with not good things?
That's good.
Say that again.
That's
Not
good.
having your dad there many times will create a void. I don't care if you're male or female. When
That's
you
true.
don't
Yes.
have that
Right.
that father or that father figure in your life, it creates a void.
Absolutely.
Just like when we don't have a relationship with our Heavenly Father, there's a void.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves trying to fill that void. And
Yes.
sometimes with not good things.
Yes.
Would you say that there were some things in your life that you gravitated toward or that you tried to fill that void with?
Absolutely. So when you don't have the father figure, just like you said, in your life or growing up in your household, the makeup of the family should be the mother and the father involved, engaged,
Right.
being relational.
Right.
But when you don't have that, you begin to look other ways.
Right.
This is
That's
like I
true.
said a little earlier. This is where you begin to look at other people that you might look at them and say, "Oh, he's got women. He gets respect. He's got money. He's
Yep.
got a crew. People value him." So then what happens for the young man, because of the void, they look to those other means that are not necessarily
Yeah,
profitable
that's
and are
true.
not healthy, right? So then when that happens, we begin to look to these different ways, look to these different avenues. But what I love about the Lord is that God will rescue us.
Yes, He
Yes.
will.
Even in the midst of that, and
Hallelujah.
sometimes that has to be part of our story for where God's
Yes.
bringing us, right?
Yeah.
So that we can go back and help people in those, that go through some of the same things that we went to. But absolutely, that when there's a void like that, we begin to fill it. And a lot of the times, not always, but especially in indigent communities, I'll say that when you talk
Yes,
about
that's true.
targeting
Absolutely.
minorities of sorts.
Right.
They begin to look to other means in those communities that are not necessarily positive.
Right.
And
That's true.
unfortunately, that's who
Yeah.
that's what we were mentored by,
That's
if you
true.
will.
Because we tend to mirror whatever it is that
Absolutely.
we
That's
see,
right.
or mimic or imitate whatever we see.
Right.
And it's just so vitally important, from my perspective, that we have those positive images in our communities.
Yes, absolutely.
And that we go after. We don't wait for them to, find themselves in situations that are dire, or wait for them to utterly destroy their lives. That we go after them. And one of the things that you're involved in, the Fatherhood Coalition?
I'm glad you said that. Yes.
Oh my goodness, when I heard about that, it just warmed my heart, because it's so important that, like I said, we make the effort
Right.
to go after them. They're not necessarily going to come to us.
Right.
We're going to have to go after them. These are our children. We're talking about our generation, our heritage,
Right.
going forward. So if no one is concerned enough, I love the African adage that it takes a community,
A whole village.
a whole village
Yes.
To
raise a child.
Right.
And believe it or not, we have a responsibility
Mm-hmm.
as the elders, you know what I mean, to go back into those communities and be able to provide something positive and bring about a positive outcome in the lives of our children. So talk a little bit about the Fatherhood Coalition. I'm excited about it.
So-
not to
No,
cut
go
you off,
ahead.
I've been coming to the meetings for the last 3 months. I'm going to get there on Monday. I promise I'm going to be there on Monday.
So yeah, thank you for bringing that up though. So we meet the first Monday of every month.
Right.
It was at Central Middle School. Now we're doing it virtually. But
Is it
and you can follow us online at dffcdads.org, dffcdads.org, and it talks about the Delaware Fatherhood Family Coalition.
Wow.
Delaware Fatherhood Family Coalition. So I'm the project coordinator trainer for Kent County. We have 3
Right.
chapters within our state and in each county, and I actually run this particular chapter here in Kent County. We meet monthly, and one of the things that we do as an organization is we have a mentoring program, which
Wonderful.
really ties into what we're talking about.
Right.
And it's really passionate, a part of my heart, and I'm passionate about it, because what we do is the people that join in the program, they're required to meet with the student a minimum of 1 time a week.
Awesome.
Roughly a half hour, 30 to 40 minutes.
Awesome.
If you can't do that, we're looking for more mentors, so we'll work with you.
Right.
But the whole goal is to be a mentor to someone that doesn't have a
Wonderful.
father figure in their life.
So
That's
necessary.
Now I want to say this because it's a mentoring program that's connected to DFFC, but not only men are mentoring. So we have, at present, we have
Ooh, I love
80% men that's mentoring, and then we have about
Wow.
20% women that's mentoring as well.
Fantastic.
So we're looking for people to connect in with that. And what we do is our whole motto with mentoring is not to help them with their grades.
Right.
Not necessarily to help them even in their behavior. People don't necessarily understand this, but our whole motto is to be present.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Because
that's so
what we've
powerful.
seen is that a lot of young men and women don't have consistent
Yes.
role models in their life that'll come whether they're
Yes.
doing bad or doing good,
Wow.
whether they've been suspended or not. So we just want to be present and be there. And what we found is as we're present, as we continue to come,
Right.
when they don't do good, when they're still getting suspended sometimes, or when they're doing good, what we found is that their behavior ultimately changes.
Absolutely.
Because the student begins to say, or the mentee, as we call him, begins to say, you care.
Right.
You still came.
That's so
Right.
key.
I
Oh,
got
my
suspended,
goodness.
but you came
They
back.
see that.
Right.
Yeah.
But they see that. So, but isn't that how the Father does us, though?
That's it.
We get suspended.
That's it.
We get an F on our report card.
Tell me about
We're
it.
inconsistent in some things.
Come
And
on.
He keeps saying, come on back.
Come on back.
I love you. So that's the same posture that we try to give even with in the mentoring program and to our mentees. That's one of the things that we do. And then also too, we do monthly initiatives. So
Okay.
with our monthly initiatives, the whole goal of that is to engage. We're really trying to get the non-custodial parent at this time,
Right.
the one that isn't involved at all,
Right.
as opposed to the custodial parent because they're
Gotcha.
already there.
They're there.
But we're trying to get the non-custodial parent involved. If they can't get involved in the child's life, we will fill the gap of that.
Right.
So that's what we give back. And I think sometimes when you've been through that or you've experienced that, it's much easier to give back because
Sure it is.
you have a heart for it, right?
Yeah.
You're compassionate about it. You've been
Absolutely.
set free from something, so now you feel an obligation. I want to challenge people even in that because
That's
often too
wonderful.
much something that we
That's
do see
wonderful.
in the African American community is people that have been helped, that have been mentored,
Come on.
that have been blessed or sown into even financially. We see this even in the historically black colleges. They don't necessarily give back to that university.
That's true.
Right.
And then they wonder why that university doesn't make it. They wonder why that child in that community doesn't make it. They wonder why that community doesn't rise up
Right.
above the natural circumstances. We have a responsibility to give
We
back.
absolutely do.
One of
There's
the
no
biggest
getting
things we
around
can
it.
find out, we can function in as people, is to go back and help somebody
That's right.
when you've been strengthened yourself.
That's
That's
right.
right.
Pay it forward.
Pay it forward.
Come
So we
on.
have to do more of that. We have to, I just want to challenge and charge people out there if you're listening, really to go back and serve somebody. And everybody's situation is different. It might
That's
not
true.
be your same neighborhood. Please, you know what I mean? But you can do something
You can
to
do
help somebody
something.
else that's less
Right.
fortunate and in this area of mentoring or just sowing into them.
I think that is so key. And I love to see men. I'm excited about the fact that women are encouraged to become involved, but I love to see our men rising up
Yeah.
and going back and grabbing those roughnecks. I mean, sometimes that's what you have to do with them, and men have that capacity.
Yeah.
They have that ability to be able to do that and relate to young men. And one thing you said was really key. It's one thing to minister or to share or to encourage from a place of sympathy, but it's another from a place of empathy.
Yes,
And empathy says, I've been there.
Right.
I've done that. I've
Yep,
felt that. I know your pain.
Right,
and you
right,
can go right to the core of that thing and begin to
Absolutely.
minister to them. And it's key, like you said, consistency.
Yes.
Them knowing that somebody's there for them. Somebody's there if I do right, if I do wrong, if I do good, if I do bad. They care.
Right.
And that's what those young men need to know, that somebody cares. Because otherwise, like you said, they're going to go looking for it.
Right.
They're going to the streets. They're going to gangs. They're going someplace to find, like Donna shared earlier, something to fill that void.
Right.
And we all have a void in the midst of us for one reason or another. And we're going to go after something to fill that void. My family laughs at me often because I watch, I'm a fan of the Learning Channel. And I like to watch the shows. One of them is the 600-Pound Life. Where the doctor encourages people who weigh like 600 plus pounds to lose weight. And he found that the key was in putting them in psychotherapy to go back to the reason that they began eating in the first place.
Right.
So we can go back to those wounded places,
The root cause.
the root cause of their illness or their ailment or their condition, and begin to minister healing to that place.
Right.
Come on, we're cutting the root of the
That's
thing
right.
now,
That's
and,
right.
and we're ensuring progress
Right.
as they're ministering to them. Don't you have something you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to speak to the mentoring program and just talk about how important it is for the mentors to be both male and female.
Yes, I love it.
Because,
I
you
love
know,
it.
some of the wounding could have come from mother.
Absolutely.
not being there, you know,
Absolutely.
That's so
or perhaps both parents were in the house, but the proper care and attention was not given,
Good point.
you know, to those men. And so they need that mothering as well as the fathering.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, many times mom may have been trying to make ends meet.
Right.
So
That's
she's
true.
working, you know, 2 and 3 jobs, and we're talking about the African American community, so that's not uncommon.
Absolutely.
You know, she's trying to be the best mom that she can by supporting her
Yes.
kids, but she may not have been able to love on them
That's
the
true.
way that she wanted to. And so, you know, those young men tend to look at mom like, my mom is my dad. You know what I mean?
So true.
She's
Yeah.
a soldier. She held it down and put us through school and supported us.
That's true.
But they still may be lacking some of those things that
Wow.
a mother teaches, you know,
Absolutely.
That's true.
because of the father not being there and her compensating for both parents.
Right.
I'm so glad that the program does, you know, encourage both male and female mentors,
Absolutely.
because you know the
That's
healing,
important.
absolutely,
Yeah.
the healing that needs to take place, I believe, comes from, you know, every hand or every elder in that community doing
Yes.
their part.
That's
Doing
right.
their
So
part.
true.
And that's key because we all do have a part. I think another thing, one of the things you shared, and another thing that we would love to be able to address is that mother that has to raise her children all by herself, and she has to be mother and father, you know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and the demands that are on her, and she's just not oftentimes capable
Yeah.
Right.
of pouring out and
You're
giving
tired.
all that. You're tired. You go
Exactly.
to work, you come
Exactly.
home. Man, it's like I can imagine that mom just wanting to be able to plop down in a chair and chill out. You know what I'm saying? But because she knows that she has responsibility to her
Yes.
children, she's driven
Yes.
to accomplish those things and to meet their needs, and she does the best she can. So, moms, we didn't forget about you either.
No, shout out to the moms.
Because I believe that, like we always share on the show, we believe God wants us healed, and that's in every dimension and every aspect and capacity of our
Yes,
lives and
indeed.
existence. And there are just so many areas of healing that we could talk about, and we're going to delve into. But we just felt it was so important to have you come on and
Thank you.
talk about, you know, your life experience and particularly what you're doing in the community. He's really active in the community. I applaud him. I commend him
Yes.
for the wonderful things that he's always involved in,
Wonderful guy.
particularly with our children, because they're so important. That's our future.
Yes.
And if we're not willing to sow into them, you know what I'm saying, to make sure that they grow up and be successful and productive individuals in our communities
Right.
and, you know, in our world even.
Right.
So is there some information, what's the additional information that can be given out with regards to how they can, anybody that's in Delaware and Kent County, Delaware can connect with you to find out how they can be a part of what you're doing with the fathers?
So you can call us at First Aid Community Action at 302-674-1355. My extension is 218. Again, 302-674-1355, extension 218. Or, as I mentioned earlier, you can go to dffcdads.org. And there's a link on there where you can begin to contact us. You can connect in with us. But we need to be healed and we need to be set free.
Absolutely.
Amen.
We thank God for doing it.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Because you turned out amazing.